Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have an exciting group of experts here to talk about cannabis physiology and nutrition. My name is Steph Shear. I'm the founder and president of Americans for Safe Access. We are a medical cannabis advocacy organization founded in 2002. And since the beginning of the organization, we have been working to integrate education about the system in our body that interacts with our medication into medical schools. Today, we're actually going to be talking about an initiative at Americans for Safe Access to integrate education about that system into an effort at HHS. And so before we get to the panelists, I'm just going to give you guys a quick background on why we're here today for this press briefing. I also want to say this is a very exciting day. I'm very honored to be working with the panelists that are here and other experts that have stepped forward to help us with this initiative. Today, we issued this call for the inclusion of the endocannabinoid system in nutrition education curricula, which is a practical guide for integrating ECS education into nutrition curriculum. And we sent this practical guide with a sign-on letter from experts and patient advocacy organizations, nutritionalists, healthcare providers to HHS and to the deans of medical schools. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about where this came from. Americans for Safe Access, as a patient advocacy organization, many of our patients have chronic diseases, and we're constantly advocating for better access to medical cannabis. We're often talking about just educating the public about chronic disease, about the sort of lack of treatment for Americans with pain, with intractable pain, and some of the failures of polypharmacy, and what that is doing to those populations. In our case, we're showing that there's a need for treatments like medical cannabis. And so we were pretty excited when we started seeing HHS also use some of the same talking points that we have been using to talk about the burden of chronic disease on our country. And so, people may not understand, this from a financial point of view. 90% of our $5.3 trillion dollars spent on U.S. healthcare is treating chronic and mental health conditions. 3 in 4 adults have at least one chronic condition. More than half have two or more. And some of the treatments that are being used to treat these diseases are compounded polypharmacy approaches that are sending more than 600,000 individuals 65 years or older to the emergency room. That's 750 individuals a day. And so part of the analysis at HHS was connecting, these chronic diseases to um, diet, to nutrition. And what HHS has been putting out is that diet-related chronic diseases are responsible for 60% of U.S. deaths. And that's 1 million Americans that die each year from diet-related chronic diseases. And in their analysis of connecting diet with chronic disease, they noticed that while there is the sort of, in their opinion, this overwhelming evidence that nutrition is one of the most powerful tools to combat disease, for both disease prevention as well as health improvement, they observed that most physicians say that they're unprepared to talk about nutrition with their patients. In fact, they found that 70% of U.S. medical schools have no required clinical nutrition coursework. And so putting all these facts together, HHS launched a campaign called Advancing Nutrition Education Initiative, encouraging medical schools to sign a pledge that they would add 40 hours of required nutrition education, and that that they wanted to see this happen quickly, in fact, starting this fall. As a part of this campaign, HHS put together a framework, a curriculum for medical schools to adopt. Now, this is voluntary, but it's sort of a guidance document for what they found should be a part of the nutrition education. And when we at Americans for Safe Access started reading through this curriculum, we were excited to see this initiative happen from HHS, especially with a secretary that has been so positive towards medical cannabis, that we were really disappointed to see that the curricula had nothing about the endocannabinoid system in that framework. And we have known for years that the lack of education about the endocannabinoid system makes it really hard for physicians to understand cannabis medicines. And so, what a lot of people don't know, both in medical schools as well as in the world of nutrition, it is actually the endocannabinoid system that connects nutrition to chronic disease. And so, really, in the spirit of the initiative for HHS, connecting the two, it's almost impossible to really understand why nutrition impacts chronic disease if you're not studying the endocannabinoid system. And so, this is may sound like one step back from the work that I do, but we have been looking for ways to integrate this education into medical school for almost 24 years. And so there's a direct correlation between the two. And looking at how committed HHS was to this initiative, that they didn't just put out this pledge for medical schools, they actually went to and started organizing the accrediting and assessment and board organizations to make sure that there would be testing on nutrition as a part of getting certified in medical training programs. That this was a serious commitment and hopefully a move towards nutrition finding its place in medical schools. And through his initiative, they've actually so far have been able to sign on 76 medical schools across 36 states, and they've all committed to 40 hours of nutrition education. And so that's more than 52,000 medical students that are going to be learning about nutrition uh, starting in the fall of 2026. But none of them are going to be learning about the endocannabinoid system. And so just as HHS and Secretary Kennedy observed that there was no education about nutrition, the same is true of the endocannabinoid system. So it's not just, that students are not going to be learning about the endocannabinoid system in their nutrition curriculum. There's no other place in medical schools that it's being taught either. I mean, there's a few elective courses. And so one of the reasons that, we haven't seen the endocannabinoid system, which was discovered in, after 1992, after we started discovering the endocannabinoids, is because the discovery of the endocannabinoid system came from cannabis sciences. And of course, cannabis has been um, prohibited until recently for over 50 years in this country. And, the stigma tied with cannabis has meant that medical students have not learned about this very important system of human physiology. And we think part of that is because of the stigma. Um, but again, it is almost impossible to understand the connection between nutrition and chronic disease without understanding this very important system. And for medical cannabis advocates, what that means is that even though medical cannabis is now legal federally in many, for many patients, if they're in the right states, we know that many medical professionals understand at some level that medical cannabis has value, but they also are not prepared to talk about it with their patients. And a major component of that is the fact that they're not learning about the endocannabinoid system. And so at Americans for Safe Access, we pulled together a group of ECS experts and went through the framework that HHS had offered and identified how you could integrate education about the endocannabinoid system into that existing curriculum. And so the report that we issued, it's not just saying that we think that this should be added, but we actually sort of did the legwork and identified both how it could be added to the items that were already on that list, and then also in a couple areas, we added a couple sections as well. Then we also took a look at existing nutrition education that's being taught at medical schools and went through their curriculum and did the same thing, identified how the endocannabinoid system could be integrated into their existing coursework. And so we took that information and today we contacted uh, HHS and asked them to consider adding ECS into the curriculum framework that they're offering, as well as the deans of the schools that had signed on and provided them this framework, our very specific curricula additions, and did so with a series of organizations and experts from around the country. And so we're calling on HHS to include ECS concepts into the guidance that they're giving for medical schools, that they're integrating ECS science into existing nutrition, physiology, metabolism, and chronic disease instructions wherever it's relevant. And then we're also offering to work with the experts that are out there that we can actually work with HHS as well as with medical schools to help them get caught up as far as understanding the endocannabinoid system and how it relates to nutrition. And so with that, I'm going to engage our panel and I'm going to talk a little bit after we hear from our speakers about sort of what's next. That the idea that there's actually a built-in platform for us to move forward and find a place for ECS education is pretty exciting. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to one of my favorite people, Dr. Stephen Dahmer, who has my dream job, even though I have no business with that job. I would never be able to do it, but it just sounds amazing. And thank you. I know you are only going to be able to be with us for a little bit, so I'm going to hand it over and hear your reaction to this initiative.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Steph. Such a pleasure to be here and such an important topic. I think it's so timely that we're talking about this and just have always appreciated the work that Americans for Safe Access has done and you leading that, Steph. And maybe just a little background about myself. For over 14 years, I've taught, lectured, written, supported research on medical cannabis and the endocannabinoid system. I've been intimately involved in this plant, research related to it and understanding this amazing system, right, that the plant harnesses in our own human physiology. I'm a physician. That's my first and foremost job. I'm triple board certified in family medicine, integrative and lifestyle medicine. I'm also the director of the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine. I think one of the things I like to speak about is, wow, what a fascinating system. We come from the angle sometimes that this is a must or a should. In my interactions, oftentimes with medical students, this is a fascinating system. It shouldn't just be a should. The potential for understanding this system better and impacting human health is incredible. It's a really unique, ubiquitous throughout all of human physiology system that's one of the oldest most fundamental regulatory systems in human biology. And what's fascinating to me is we only discovered it a short time ago in the history of the of medical history. Again, in many lectures I've given, I describe it as a homeostatic supramodulatory system, which is a lot of words for this unique system that helps the body find balance, right? And for me in my day job as a physician, oftentimes we're struck, right, by symptoms, by disease, by insults to our homeostasis or our balance mode, that this system really could potentially help us find that balance again. And I think one of the stats that maybe was missing, Steph, for me, that's so important is my last perusal. We're at over 20% of Americans this past year that utilize cannabis in some form. My last perusal of antidepressant use is less than half of that, right? Less than half Americans utilize antidepressants than those that utilize cannabis. Imagine a medical school where students weren't taught about antidepressants. It seems unheard of. And yet here we are faced with the doctors of the future not learning about this incredible system that's incredibly important within human physiology. And the majority, not the majority, but a good percentage, over 20% of our patients that walk through our door are using. And I just want to state too that, again, other work is really paralleling this amazing work that's being done. Dr. Yuval Zolotov just recently in October of 2025 in JAMA Network Open, an incredibly important paper on medical cannabis competencies. And Dr. Zolotov et al. Identified 6 core competencies through a modified Delphi of over 23 experts that really, along with the work that Americans for Safe Access has done, the roadmap is there. The path has been paved. And I think this is something that I just really wanted to call attention to on this call. I truly believe that our medical system has been far too reactive. When there is a ubiquitous endogenous system of the importance of the endocannabinoid system, when over a fifth of our patients are utilizing this, we should stop waiting to decide whether this is incorporated. And I well understand the competition for topics in medical school curriculum and education. There isn't much space, but this is one that deserves it. And that's why I wanted to be a part of this call. Over 20% of Americans, and that number is growing quickly. If we don't teach the physicians of the future to be able to speak in an educated manner about this, we're missing a tremendous opportunity. And I'll just take maybe a last minute to say that, in my work in medical cannabis, I've sometimes compared it because this has been my greatest concern. We've seen it happen with alcohol. We've seen it happen with sugar. We've seen it happen with opioids. We supersize a single constituent that has addictive potential and it runs off the rails. Our only opportunity is education. And that is to educate people that this is not a system to abuse and to throw high doses at. This is a system to dance with and to develop a relationship with the plant because, like any system, has potential for amazing things and has a potential for harm. And we need to get in front of that, and educating the doctors of the future is one of the best methods we can do that. I applaud the work by Americans for Safe Access and this coming out, and the sooner we start, the better.
Thank you for that,
Here.
Steve. I'm wondering, do any of our panelists have questions for Steve? I had a couple before we let him go.
Yeah, I think this is a huge push for nutrition education. I'm going to talk a little bit about more sort of dig into what this is about. But I think from a medical education perspective, like we need to continue to make this push as well. I know this is actually nutrition in medical schools is the initiative that we're at. So this is that big opening to finally take this important system that yes, cannabis is important about, and yes, it helped us discover this system, but really to open the dialogue about what health looks like, what health can be, how can we support the endocannabinoid system as a tool to not just be better or be healthier, right? But even to augment the cannabis therapy we're trying to use. And so there's so much opportunity here that blends in health and wellness and nutrition and this endocannabinoid system, this thing that we've all been talking about for, it sounds like, 20, 26 years or longer for some of us. It's a really exciting time. So I'm glad to see that. I think we need to find a way to get it into nutrition programs as well and make sure that they're talking about it. Because then we can really start digging into what is the formula that we're giving our patients in hospitals. What are these elemental bases? Are we're really moving in the fat world, for example, to omega-3 fatty acids in our IV fats, for example, in hospital settings. And I just see so much more coming from this when we start talking about the ECS in the context of fats and fatty acids.
Cody, I think
Yeah.
that's a fantastic point. And sorry, Steph, I'll jump in real quick that, I hear you saying it's much bigger, right? And I completely agree. And I think that that is so true in that we are scratching the surface on this remarkable system that unless we're talking about it and even getting our medical students excited about it at a younger age, this will develop the researchers of the future that will explore. There are 1,000 different areas to explore research related to this system that we haven't even begun yet. And that's what honestly concerns me more than anything is how ubiquitous, how important the system is in the many different paths, and we're not even scratching the surface. We're not even touching it.
Uh, Totally, 100%. It is ubiquitous everywhere, but yet we're not talking about an anatomy and physiology when we talk about those organs and the systems that make up the entire body, but not the interconnected molecular signaling system that exists in almost every cell type, which is a wild idea. So, thank you for your insights there. Steve, did you want to ask anything before Dr. Dahmer has to run?
No, I'm just super fired up now.
That's what these calls can do. All right, Steve, I think something that I learned actually just from trying to get people to sign on to this onto the sign-on letter, I figured out like how many people and how many fields know nothing about the endocannabinoid system. And so I feel like something that I would just kind of want to caution people on within, especially if you're in the nutrition world or if you're in the cannabis world, is that it's like, the whole world is working uh on like a DOS startup, like their first computer still when it comes to cannabis. And we come at people with the craziest amount of information, right? And ECS is like, if you don't understand this, like what the hell are you talking to me about these other components? And I think that we're seeing what I like about cannabis policy and cannabis and medicine and cannabis and the endocannabinoid system is it feels like it's something that's like right on time, right? Like these chronic diseases, they need a new approach. But without the basic building blocks, we're not going to see that innovation. So I see a lot of people get really excited and then go into a wormhole about cannabinoids or about the endocannabinoid system and forget to like tell the people around them what the endocannabinoid system is. And so, I would just love to hear from you, Steve, before you go. Just this may sound like a very basic question, but what is what does it mean when a physician doesn't understand nutrition and chronic disease? Like how are they how are they experiencing patients that come to with chronic disease when they don't understand basic nutrition?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Steph. And again, I think that was the reason for this push is, the last perusal. Oh no, I may have froze here for a second.
We can still hear you.
Okay. 72% of physicians' visits culminate in a pharmaceutical. And again, I see oftentimes our role as physicians, unfortunately, really being pushed in that direction as opposed to moving upstream. And nutrition is probably one of our strongest tools in combating and prevention of chronic disease. And to not be able to speak to it and to not be able to use that tool is an absolute disservice for our patients. Um, I'm not sure if you lost me, Steph, or
No,
if you
no,
could.
we can still hear
Oh,
you. We
we
can
can
still
hear
hear you.
you.
Yeah.
Good. My computer froze a little bit, but I want to just open up and I realize I'm giving a little bit of a curveball on this question, but just want to share something that I even realized when you even asked me to be a part of this. I think the elephant in the room that we still don't talk about is the stigma surrounding cannabis and endocannabinoid system. And I know we have all heard that 1,000 times, but I just want to even share. For 14 years, I've lectured about this, asking people to take an objective viewpoint, look at the data as we would anything else that comes through a healthcare system, through our medical school education, and it's remarkable. It absolutely should be included in medical school student training. It should be included in more research. But that stigma, and it just was even front and center for me in agreeing to this call with an academic post, it still is just there screaming at us. That prevents us from talking about this as much as we should, getting in front of this. And I think just a call for anyone listening to this, and I know many of us have been banging this drum for a while, but look at this from an objective standpoint, and the facts are there that this needs to be included. This needs to be something that medical students learn about. This needs to be something we get in front of.
No, thank you for that. And it is, I think, we could have a whole master's program around stigma and cannabis. But I think we could also have a whole master's class in a stigma around nutrition, honestly. I mean, I think that we were working on a campaign for especially for patients who are paying out of pocket and can't afford cannabis, like other ways to augment the endocannabinoid system, like go for a run and then use cannabis, or make sure you have a healthy meal. But anytime there is stigma involved, there's usually another underlying issue around privilege. And I think that what we see in healthcare is that wealthy people have their specialists and the people that they go to. And for those who, are feeling the same churn that doctors are, that they get less than 2 minutes with their doctor, nutrition doesn't come up. And so I'm really hopeful that this platform is also a way to talk about the endocannabinoid system and about cannabis medicines actually from the goalpost. Like what does a healthy system look like? And then that's what you're trying to get back to. And I think
Right.
for so many patients and physicians, they've never had a healthy endocannabinoid system with the diets we have in our country. So getting back to basics is I think it's right here in this initiative. So I'm very, very hopeful and always excited to get your input, Steve. But I think that just from, I think in the next few weeks, I'm going to be pulling you into an ECS tutorial for the nutrition community. So there's another thing I learned from this process. So any final thoughts, Steve, before I let you
Oh,
go?
just appreciate that. Appreciate this opportunity and to talk about this. And Steph, as you're well aware, again, we've been speaking to that for decades here at the Anderwell Center for Integrative Medicine, the importance of nutrition. And this is an exciting time. It's getting more attention as it deserves, as really the core for our health across the board. And for the ECS to be a part of that discussion, I think is absolutely essential. And so I'm sorry to miss the rest of this call and the insights from my amazing colleagues, Cody and Stephen, and you as well, Steph. But thank you for including me in on this.
We'll send you the recording, and maybe the Andrew Weil Center can create 8 weeks to an optimal endocannabinoid system.
I like
Ooh,
that
that sounds
thought.
like a fun way to spend a grant
That
money.
was my favorite first book from Dr. Weil. So I got it from a PBS donation.
One of my favorites as well. Well, it's great to see all you. I'm going to sign off and wish you a wonderful rest of the call.
Okay, Cody, let's
Give
hear
me the
from
mic.
it's yours.
Look, this is such an important conversation, and I kind of want to like just reflect on how we got here. You can get a master's degree in cannabis stigma, but you can also get a master's degree in cannabis science, and that's what I ended up doing. And so I went back and I started to understand how we discovered this impact. Cannabis has been a favorite plant of humans for a really long time for all the different reasons: the fibers, the seeds, the stalks, everything that you can get from this plant was useful. And some communities figured out that they had a variety that you could use the resin to take you to another place, perhaps to be closer to God, or perhaps to be closer to a past loved one. In eventuality, we developed this super powerful plant that we have today that can really crank out cannabinoids and do all that it is. But it wasn't until, despite being carried around by humans for tens of thousands of years and probably smoked for thousands of years as well, not probably, definitely. The actual endocannabinoid system, the system on which THC acts on to cause the intoxicating effects, is a really modern discovery, like the 80s. You kind of pointed it out in your introduction, Steph. And so that system is what we discovered with THC. And this whole time we had sort of our THC goggles on, or our THC lenses. And I've done some lectures around this before, so you might have heard this from me. But if we hadn't approached this since 1899 thinking, hey, the money sauce, the good stuff, the THC is the one thing in this plant that we need that does things. It's the active ingredient, right? Which we know is not really the way plants and plant medicines work. That active ingredient mentality has led us down the pharma path, which led us to this amazing discovery, the whole reason we're at this talk today. But the industry and what used to be sort of sort of modest multi-cannabinoid plant has become sort of a monomolecular, one-minded THC focus due to regulations, due to market impacts, due to just normal human behavior, and it's all mixed together. But what I want to take and just basically say is like, that's kind of like the last time we need to talk about cannabis or in this thing, right? Cannabis got us to the conversation we're here today, but that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about is that amazing system that starting in 1988 and finished in sort of the 2000s, you could say, is this broad overarching master homeostatic regulatory system present in all vertebrate, all animals with a spine on planet Earth. That's what we're here to talk about. And that inherently comes with stigma because of cannabis. And we almost need to break that because the system has almost nothing to do with cannabis, other than the fact that a plant many millions of years ago, let's say 8 million years ago for cannabis, figured out how to make a molecule that could interact with a system that was already here, that was already in all the animals walking around planet Earth. The dinosaurs would have left us already, but all of our early mammals, many of the fish in the sea, which predate dinosaurs, have this system. It's estimated the endocannabinoid system is a 600 million-year-old system, and cannabis is only an 8 million-year-old plant, maybe 12. So this is an incredibly basic system that we all share, and it's super critical. It runs, this is the part where nutrition comes in, it runs off of the fats that are surrounding each cell. Every eukaryote on the planet has a bilipid membrane made out of fats that keeps the stuff in the cell in and the stuff out of the cell out. And because it has all those lipids, it decided to take those fats and send signals to find that homeostasis, that balance that Dr. Dahmer was talking about. And that's the critical component here is this is a lipid signaling system. And because of that, where did the fats come from in our cells? They come from what we eat. And now we can connect this thing between the endocannabinoid system and its dysregulation and hypothesis on chronic disease, the intake of fatty acids, and sort of overall health and wellness, and kind of create this initiative to try to really help people heal by leveraging what cannabis has taught us, not necessarily even leveraging cannabis or specifically THC at all. Woohoo! So I think we don't have to really talk about cannabis anymore, and I hope that that's what if our media friends are joining us, is this system is about the underlying architecture that cannabis acts on, not about cannabis itself. We're still pro cannabis. We think cannabis is medicine and all of the amazing things, but really, this initiative to HHS, this letter, is trying to highlight the importance of the system that cannabis helped us elucidate, not that cannabis is important in this context. Oh, Steph, you're muted there, friend.
You just see my mouth moving.
You just need one more arm, that's all.
Exactly. That's a different medicine. Um, and so, Cody, I think that, with your pharmacy background, I feel like there's something I feel like that most pharmaceuticals are developed for people that they just assume that they're not well, not well for what they're being treated for, right? And I'm just wondering how it would impact pharmacology if all of a sudden every American understood their endocannabinoid system and was trying to put that in balance before they went to pharmaceuticals, like what that would look like.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it wouldn't really like fit very well into the model, right? The healthcare industrial complex, not pointing any fingers, it's all a big problem, and there's plenty of good being done in the blob of a mess as well. So I'm part of that blob, so I'm not again crapping on it too much, but um, it would mean a lot to preventing chronic illness, particularly, I think, from a mental health perspective. And I want to kick it to Stephen here because one thing that was underappreciated, I talked about nutrition, and let's talk about that really briefly. Anandamide, you'll hear this when you talk about the endocannabinoid system, is made is what THC mimics, and it's made from these omega-6 fatty acids. And we get a lot of those in our diet here in Western society. And it's possible that we're getting too much and it's setting this system out of balance or out of whack, leading to inflammation and other problems. So other than cannabis, we have this dietary problem and we need to use tools, not just cannabis, to fight back. And there's so many in our toolbox. And that's where I was going to tap Stephen. For one, we talked about this earlier, is exercise, and you kind of mentioned it, Steph. Have your patient go on a run. Some moderate exercise with some consistency can go a long way to reinforcing the endocannabinoid system. And how it does that, we're still figuring out, and like in which mechanism it does so. But it's been pretty evident that across most studies, the resiliency, or there is some sort of up regulation in the system when we exercise, which Stephen's background is in exercise physiology, or at least part of his eclectic background is in exercise physiology. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about lifestyle interventions to support the ECS. I talked a little bit about diet and too many omega-6 fatty acids, and now we need more omega-3s in Western society. But what about lifestyle?
Yeah. And I think that, um, it's sort of like the basics that around health are always exercise and eat better, right? Like that's always the answer. And in fact, during COVID, I did a deep dive into physiology just to like create a manual for myself to understand nutrition. And I was like, the hippies had it right. Like they just didn't know to call it the endocannabinoid system, but they knew about amino acids and the fats. They just didn't know why they were telling us to eat those. So I feel like there's not some big mystery. The challenge is just that people they haven't figured out how people can make money. You make more money off people being sick, I guess.
That's true, but they haven't connected those dots. The
Yeah.
endocannabinoid system, the sort of living well, eating well, in touch with earth and your spirit and your spirituality, like that whole picture. That's kind of what I'm getting at. And I think that endocannabinoid system fits so well into there when you consider lifestyle stuff, maybe like meditation or acupuncture or all these things that we can still talk about. But it would mean so much if we people knew that they could eat better and treat themselves better, and that would augment the way they feel every day and augment the medicine that they enjoy so much. It would go leaps and bounds.
No, absolutely. All right, Stephen, I think we need to hear from you. You're gonna connect these dots for us.
Um, my name is Steve Philpott Jr. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I'm a researcher. I'm an educator, and I like to educate about cannabis science and the endocannabinoid system. My path is very, I don't even want to say it's unique because there's more people that I think have this story than we know publicly. As a Marine, as a kid growing up in Chicago, absolutely no cannabis, right? Um, when I broke my leg when I was deployed, I didn't know that it was broken. I thought it was just a really bad fracture. I came back home, my doctor was like, you need a couple surgeries, and a couple surgeries come with months of opioid prescriptions. And I actually was prescribed opioids the same time somebody in my unit overdosed on opioids. I was very confused. Like, just so many things running through my mind. Like, the doctor gave him those, though, like they're safe. So I had a lot of questions. And once my time was up as an active duty Marine, I vowed that I would go back to school and I would learn as much as I could about the human body. Disclaimer, I am not a doctor. I am not a doctor. However, I actually went to school. I got my associates in fitness and exercise. I wanted to become a personal trainer. I didn't get enough information there, though, about the human body. So I got my undergrad in kinesiology, exercise science, and nutrition, like we're talking about. That was great, but you can really only be a physical therapist or like a coach. So I coached in the NCAA for 8 years. I was a sports scientist for 3 years. I worked with men's and women's national soccer team. I had 300 clients, sports teams. I was collecting data on these athletes about their health and performance and all this, but something that was so interesting was I saw similar mental health effects athletes were experiencing that I saw in the military. And then you go on ESPN and you see young athletes taking their lives. And I was like, wait, 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 wait. there's got to be a direct correlation between the stress that these athletes are experiencing and the stressors that we experienced in the military. So I actually ended up leaving the NCAA completely, leaving sports science. And I was a medical patient while I was coaching. And I decided that I wanted to go deeper into kind of the science of it. So to make an endless story short, I got my master's in environmental biology because I was interested in the science of trichomes. I always heard people talk about the whole plant, but the more I learned about trichomes, I was like, it's really about the chemistry going on in these trichomes. And these trichomes are really just an anatomical feature of a living organism, right? So that conversation helped me learn about cannabis. However, I had to bring it full circle to go back to where I started, nutrition. And with Cody, kind of everything we've been saying today, I kind of this is what I want to post to everybody. I think about the word metabolism versus nutrition. Every time somebody says nutrition, my brain automatically goes to metabolism because I think the word nutrition is stigmatized, and I didn't think about it
Yeah.
until you guys said it.
Yeah.
The word nutrition is stigmatized, and it's almost a fad. It's almost a popular thing to do. It's just like saying diet. I tell people like, don't say diet. Like it's a cumulative collection of everything you've been putting in your body. But the diet that you're talking about is a fad, right?
Right.
So all this to say, in kinesiology, physical therapy, sports medicine, we talk about energy systems all the time. When we're training athletes, when we're changing their diets, you change their diet based on what their needs are. And metabolism, to me, the easiest way to explain it to people, I'm like, you got to break stuff down to build stuff. It's the easiest. Why do we eat things? Cody just said that we get these endocannabinoids from fats. Again, you got to break stuff down to build stuff. So that's all metabolism means. It means breaking something down and building something else. When we talk to athletes about protein, exactly how much protein we eat, they understand metabolism maybe better than any other group. The
Interesting.
popularity of diets is marketed to us through who? Athletes. Performance, fitness, health is marketed to us by who? Special forces. They're the most fit people. All of these groups suffer from pain, sleep, and appetite issues at some of the highest rates that we see in our country. And the endocannabinoid system is directly involved in all three of those experiences. So, on one end, you have a human experiencing an issue with pain, sleep, or appetite. And then all the way on the other end, we know there's systems that are experiencing some type of dysfunction. The endocannabinoid system has really just been like this bridge to connect us across this human experience and right this actual functional or dysfunction that's going on.
Yeah, no, thank you for that explanation. I think, you're right. I think you in the same way that there's we see the largest amount of medical innovation during war, right? Because there's a lot of people, right, who are going through crazy things and it's time to try stuff out. I think the same happens to athletes, that's horrible. They're really the ones who get pushed, whether it's hormones or just really restrictive diets. I can't imagine what the endocannabinoid system looks like of a wrestler. Um, but right, it's just like having to lose weight. Um, but how does it do you talk about the endocannabinoid system with athletes? Do you talk about that within the context of nutrition and exercise? Or do you feel like it's the secret word?
Yes, Cody and I are actually instructors for a course called ACEs. It's called Athletes, Cannabinoids, and the Endocannabinoid System, specifically in response to professional sports leagues removing drug testing, but not thinking about the compliance and the responsibility of now being responsible for these athletes and what they put in their bodies. So, yes, we have that course ACEs. It is available online. Uh, but at the same time, when I do talk to athletes, Cody says something extremely important. And if I can leave everybody with one thing, it's this. There's a lot of things we've been told about biology that aren't necessarily holding true when we get more science, right? And data. One of the things is that your autonomic nervous system is automatic and you can't influence it, right? It's automatic. It's just something that happens. Breathing, great example. However, you can take over your breathing, right? So what's interesting is finding out things like intentional breath work, yoga, just meditation and sitting still, what we were talking about, balance, homeostasis, that triggers the endocannabinoid system, right? But also on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, intense exercise, a free throw for the championship, all of these things, your senses, your five senses are taking in information and they are causing effects on the endocannabinoid system. So that shows it is a part of the sport. It is a part of rebuilding, recovery during and after the sport, but it's also a part of the mental effect. Nothing I just said had anything to do with cannabis. That's how important the endocannabinoid system is. So for me, I'm a member of the NSCA, the National Strength and Conditioning Association. We talk about metabolism, and I believe there's been one presentation at a conference where somebody's talked about the endocannabinoid system. I'm a member of the American College of Sports Medicine. These are sports medicine doctors. So these are doctors. We've talked about medical school today, right? But these are also the sports medicine doctors that are dealing with the top athletes in the country. These sports medicine doctors, I think, could be the ones to really combine that gap between performance, athleticism, and human performance research, but also the medical industry.
And nutrition. So, like, we have nutritionists on these teams. The nutritionists need this baseline education. Goes back to what Dr. Dahmer and Stephen kind of said earlier introduction. Like, this should be an anatomy and physiology class. If you take advanced anatomy and physiology in high school, yeah, somebody should mention the master homeostatic regulatory system present in all of the cells that help them communicate in all advanced organisms on the planet. Yeah, that should happen. And I think that this is a first step to doctors, but it's only part of that fight. And don't worry, we're going to keep fighting. But we need your help, media, if you're listening or you get the end of this presentation. We got to elevate this message.
Yeah, I think that there's actually, I know somebody in Maryland that has created a ECS education for eighth grade biology that she teaches that's actually getting adopted. And so I think that I as a advocate and I'm basically a problem solver is really what an organizer means. And I think that I hear people a lot of times talk about issues like no endocannabinoid system education in medical schools, or we could take out the long book of all the issues we have, especially when it comes to medical cannabis. But you really have to go to the source and find and meet people where they're at. And I think that we are seeing this, even with endocannabinoid system education, that um, we have to remember, like, we have to step back as advocates and meet people where they're at, right? And don't take the education way
Yeah,
above their head.
totally.
Um,
And I'm guilty. I'm guilty. So I think, like, again, this is an initiative for sort of medical doctors, but I think that we need to scale this down to all the levels so people can understand. And even if we're not talking about the endocannabinoid system, we should getting to the root of the nutritional problem that leads to the ECS, right? We don't even need to talk about the physiology. Let's talk about the solution in empowering people to change their diets to increase the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, to increase how often they're eating fermented foods, how many vegetables they're eating, because it turns out it's even as complicated as the microbiome, talking to the endocannabinoid system, talking to the inflammasome, the inflammatory pathways of the body, and it's all interconnected, and it's like very natural. Like you said, the hippies knew this. Nothing that I'm telling you is new information. It's just providing more context as to why those things are good. And for at least, especially the stoners in the group, really, empowering them to understand the system that they're tinkering with all the time and recognizing the best way to do that, and to support that system. But it touches every part of healthcare if we really get down to the brass tacks, because this system is all over the body doing really important work.
I want to say one thing.
yeah, please.
Uh, Supplements right now are going crazy.
Mhm.
More people have asked me about creatine in the last 2 years than ever in my. When I was in high school, they told us creatine was like legal steroids. Now, you go to an anatomy and physiology class, you find out creatine is a natural thing that your body produces and it's part of your energy systems, right? So that's how uninformed we are on the most researched supplement in human history, by the way.
Right.
That's the most researched supplement. So think about it. When we talk about nutrition, people thought creatine was a steroid. It's a naturally occurring thing, and it's the most researched supplement in human history. So when we do come with these conversations, we also have to remember, like, I'm talking about metabolism and nutrition, but we have to also, I use the endocannabinoid system to teach people about basic human biology. I don't come with trying to teach them about a new system. I
Right.
teach them about basic human biology, right? And then I incorporate, hey, you know how this works? You know how that works? It works because this system is incorporated into the cells, right? And that's the easiest way for me.
And I think that so today we are here because people signed on to a letter. We sent out this rationale to HHS, and sending an email to a government agency is just about like sending an email to anyone these days. So it's really just a first step. And so I want to talk a little bit about the context of this campaign and broader work and what it's going to take to make this happen. And so um, again, I feel like just putting together this rationale document and talking to people, it made me realize like how much we have to start at basics, right? And really go back to that that ECS 101 course that everyone's sick of giving. This is the time. I also realized is that if we're gonna be successful in getting ECS adopted into this effort, into this curriculum specifically, it means people on the campuses where, like if you're in medical school, if you're a student, if you're a faculty, and your university signed on to the initiative, then take this rationale document to the dean or start with the teacher, right? Build up some effort. Get a petition going in your college, right? That you want to see ECS added in. And this is the pathway forward. But it's not just going to happen because I wrote a paper. I mean, if things just happen because I wrote a white paper, woo,
We would have achieved everything by now.
exactly, everything would be done. Haven't signed on yet. We made the sign on public, so we started with sort of an internal group of folks, but now we're opening up to get as many signatures as possible. And you can use this campaign as an opportunity to talk about the ECS system and about, I think, nutrition gives us it's like a PG-13 way to get to cannabis, right? It's a comfortable way. Like you can literally tie it to everything. And so beyond signing on, wherever you're feeling frustration and there not being endocannabinoid system education, figure out a way to bring it there. And whether that means just giving a little informal teach-in to your colleagues, whether that means uh, you know, tricking people to come over for game night. Just kidding. Not game night at Cody's house again. Um, but I think
I
that
just need
people
25 minutes of your time.
exactly. But you'll be surprised, like people give up 25 minutes to watch like the dog whisperer talk about his dog food, 25 minutes goes by really
Or
quickly.
just one of those Facebook videos that won't actually show you the
Exactly.
thing that it promised to show you 25 minutes ago.
Exactly. So we're going to be putting out a bunch of tools that, don't look at them and say like, oh, this is basic. That's the point, right? We're really getting back to basics because really we need to standardize the language that we're talking about, and whether that is in healthcare, well-being, making sure that this system is healthy will make um, everyone's life better, including advocates that are having a hard time getting cannabis past places. No, just kidding. But yeah, have a healthy ECS and make your advocates day. There was a question I had put into your introductions that I'm going to come back to. How does it impact your field that other people don't know about the endocannabinoid system? Let's start with you, Cody.
Look, I mean, the fact of the matter is there's numerous pharmaceuticals developed to target the endocannabinoid system, and the pharmacists should know. They're just not being taught. And I know this because I'm a teacher, and I ask my students every year they come in, did you learn about this in A&P? Did you learn? And these students come in with bachelor's degrees. This is not, they had to take all of these underlying. So what it really impacts is sort of stigma around using a cannabis medicine. The Schedule 1 status of cannabis has long been stigmatized, so people have said, it's not important. I don't really need to learn about that system. As we now get to this point where the ECS is here, and as more and more drug companies are jumping in and trying to develop products, it is past time they learn about it. And every day that we don't get pharmacists more educated about this system, they're less prepared to deal with the nutritional challenges that the country faces, as well as the increasing cannabis use amongst almost every age range, except for, fortunately, our youth, which seems to be stable.
Nice. Steve, same question to you.
How does it affect my field? I think it affects my field really in two ways. One is the fact that athletes, high performance populations, and when I say that, let me make sure I include military, first responders, doctors, nurses, anybody that has an excessive less of stress where their performance dictates whether they keep their job or not.
Mhm.
Those people are the people who have some of the worst sleep, some of the worst nutrition, and dealing with some of the most chronic pain. I think that we need to consider the people who we're trying to help before we go to the stigma. And I've told people this all the time in the military. They're like, no to cannabis. I'm like, what's the alternative? And that's the second part. The second part is these people are some of our highest performers. They also deal with the highest rates of mental health ailments. So when we see mental health as a societal thing, we really have to start looking at this as a bigger problem. We throw all these resources at mental health when there's a system directly involved with the HPA axis, our stress, our hormones, our recovery, and we are completely leaving it out the way. So for me, again, dealing with athletes and these high performance populations, I think they are a great proxy to general society, right? Because we like to
Yep.
research those groups. And I think if we show how the endocannabinoid system helps those groups through research, maybe we can open other people up to it.
I love that. I've been diving into the nutrition side of things again for this project. It also, really puts up this disparity again for the haves and have-nots. I mean, I think people say just eat better without thinking about food deserts or like what food costs or what you can
Cost,
actually get
time,
at
how
a
many
grocery
hours do you
store.
spend commuting? How, how accessible are those foods?
Can
So
you
many
walk
things.
in your neighborhood at night? Like these are all real issues that I feel like get glossed over. And I'll just share just this little vision about if you know Americans for Safe Access, you've heard us talk about our federal policy agenda, which is to create an Office of Medical Cannabis and Cannabinoid Control in HHS. And that's what we've been working towards for a long time. But I don't my real vision is that once cannabis is integrated into our healthcare system, that actually that office, that agency would actually become the Office of Medicine and Nutrition. Because I think that we don't have that in this country, right? The FDA is looking at human created medicines and human created like additives and crap, right? And telling us if they're okay. But nobody is saying like, actually, this is a better medicine, right? Like that, like there isn't anyone doing that or deciding what we actually need someone to develop for us. And, I think it was very telling spending some time in Czech Republic and in the EU that, the EU actually um, declassifies things as food all the time. Perfect example, Subway went and opened up a shit ton of stores all over Europe, and the EU taxed their food because their bread is not qualified as food, right? I think that's very telling, right? But for many people, including myself at different times in my life, a Subway sandwich is like it could be 2 meals, it could be 3 meals. As we're talking about um, ECS health and talking about some of these solutions, I just wanted to, in the same way that we've been talking about cannabis access without actually thinking about solutions for people to have access, I think we have to think about the same thing in nutrition as well. Like, how are we going to ensure that people get access to foods? and not just shame them when they get diabetes because they don't have access to it. So,
I know. And if we're talking about like our ideal, oh, actually, go ahead, Stephen.
This whole time we're talking about this, I'm thinking about that when we say gut brain axis, right? Or I remember growing up, I always thought obesity was like, oh, you're obese because you don't have self-control and you can't eat, and that's why obesity is stigmatized. 'Cause they say
sure.
people can't stop eating. Well, then you find out that their entire gut microbiome has changed, and that the things that occur in your mind are heavily influenced by the things that are made in your gut. And
Yep.
if somebody's eating fake food and their gut is dead, then it makes sense why there's a common comorbidity between gut ailments like Crohn's, IBS, and colitis, and mental health things like anxiety and depression and things like
Yeah.
that. That's super important. And the endocannabinoid system is heavily involved in the HPA axis, which lies directly along that pathway of communication. Not to get too crazy into the heavy into the science, but
Integrated into the whole thing, into the feeding, the pathways, the reward pathways. We know this because when we use THC, we get this sort of insatiable appetite and we get the reward. Food tastes even better. And that's because the endocannabinoid system is critical to this. So if we have an imbalanced ECS, and there's emerging evidence to suggest we probably do, although to be honest, the methodologies in this relatively new system are still pretty weak. There's emerging evidence that we do have this dysregulation, and therefore it makes sense that we've got a food imbalance problem and a fat and sugar imbalance problem. And so this is really like sort of, if we want to talk about health pyramids, really at the foundation of that pyramid that we need to be talking about things like fatty acid balance in our diets. Because right now, if you just say, meat and dairy, maybe back in the day when meat and dairy was made from grass grazing cows and all of that great stuff, but now they eat corn and soy, and those are omega-6. So this is even blends into our meat supply, how the ECS is being dysregulated through the fats that we feed our animals. So it's just, we could have this conversation for days. I know we're running
Yeah.
out of time,
No, I
but
love it. I love it.
it's just, there's so much that we need to do. But again, if we're going to talk about like sort of um what we can do is really start to feed the body what it needs to have a healthy ECS, which is mindfulness and exercise and healthier fats and more vegetables and more fermented gut supporting foods. And if you can do all those things, your outcomes in cannabis, I believe, will likely just in general be better because you're supporting the system while the wind in the sails is the THC.
I love that. I think that, nutrition isn't, it's not rocket science. It's something that I feel like everyone in healthcare knows that it is an issue, right? But it's not necessarily something that they take time to understand. And I think that the reality is unless you are forced to learn something, you're not going to learn it. And I think that that is what we're seeing I've seen it within like certification, right? Like if somebody needs continuing education, right? That's one of the major problems with doctors and just cannabis in a clinical setting is that there aren't CMEs that are teaching them that. There's CMEs teaching them about CHS and about cannabis use
Yeah.
disorder, and that's all that's available. So that's the experience they're having. But I think that uh, that when we think about every single healthcare worker being educated, it's really overwhelming. And so I just want to invite people to start where you're at, look at like what certification or what like in like whether sometimes hospital, if you work in a hospital, they create a curriculum, get in there. I'm sure the people who run that are like ready for someone to come in with another idea because they're sick of doing it.
Yep.
Whether it's
Physicians
a
can do grand rounds. The dietitians can do their weekly CE. We can do nurse education. They usually do once a month. It can all be CE accredited, and that incentivizes people to take it. Anybody who's in the system, in the blob I mentioned earlier, can find a way to integrate some degree of this. Even if you have to do a CHS talk, teach them about the endocannabinoid system, teach them about the nutrition component and the foundation, and find a way to continue to integrate this information.
Yeah, and I want to invite everyone in the spirit of this project that if you have developed an ECS education for a specific group of people, share it with us. Like let's share what information is out there. And I just want to challenge everyone to not make this just be something you clicked on and signed, but something that you're actually thinking about how we're going to integrate this education, because it's a nice reminder just how basic it is, right? Not just for our advocacy in cannabis or in our advocacy in health, but really just in better understanding whole body approaches to health and well-being. So
Yeah,
thank you,
this is
Stephen.
alma
Thank
mater.
you, Cody. It's always a pleasure. I'm going to put the two of you on a call soon to talk about some ECS courses. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
Long overdue, much needed, and appreciate all of your hard work. And it couldn't have been done without you. And then same to you, Steve. Appreciate your input, sir.
Appreciate y'all having me again. I agree, long overdue. I'm gonna say this to the general consumer, to the general just person out there. I personally believe, from my experience, I got my minor in nutrition in 2016, 10 years ago. Society knows significantly more about general nutrition, about protein, carbs, fats, supplements, and all those things. That's empowering because to me, that means the average person is now more prepared to talk about the ECS than we were even just 10 years ago. So nobody should feel intimidated by the ECS. I think every single person should be interested for themselves
Yeah.
and know that there's an understanding.
I love that. I love that. And I'm just gonna just to end by putting a plug for Cannabis Safety Month. September is Cannabis Safety Month. Each week we're going to be covering different perspectives in cannabis safety and really taking on these issues head on so that our opponents aren't weaponizing these issues, but that we're able to create a safe space to discuss, whether it's CHS, whether it's drug driving, whether it's pregnancy and cannabis. We're going to create a space to have those conversations and hopefully create a hub where people can find solutions. We have the Cannabis Safety Awards, so we're going to be celebrating people that are coming up with those solutions, so that when Sam puts out their press release, reporters will be able to find that there are, in fact, people within our community coming up with those solutions. So join us tonight. You can go to the event section on Americans for Safe Access website, safeaccessnow.org, or just look for it on our website. We're going to be rolling out a bunch of stuff, and sign up for our emails, like us, follow us, do all that good stuff. And again, I just want to thank our panelists for joining us today. And hopefully, the next time you hear from us on this topic, we're announcing that HHS and all the deans of these medical schools have answered our call and are incorporating the endocannabinoid system into nutrition education, both as a preventative health measure, but also to ensure that medical professionals understand human physiology and can better understand those patients who are finding relief in medical cannabis. Now let's get this information out to everyone. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you at the next iteration, but also get involved. We need you.
Woot woot.